I don't care that you guys like me or want me or whatever. I am still Walter's daughter.
Canada's main objective in Indian policy is to reduce its liabilities.
There have been people who had honestly been waiting decades for their application to go through.
This is important for my kids also, not just for me.
It's a funny way, but no one's laughing. Funny what you say, to show you care. Just another day, and nothing's changing. You've got a funny way of letting me down.
The Indian Act really was a weapon to essentially break families and separate and destroy connections and trump relationships.
For former Sawridge First Nation trustee Catherine Twin, the purpose of Canada's Indian Act is clear. It stands in contrast to what she sees as Indigenous justice.
Love, truth, honesty, respect, humility, wisdom, courage. It washed all that away and trumped it with legal categories. And these legal categories we're still struggling with.
Bill C-31 of the Indian Act, enacted in 1985, created two regimes of membership control. Section 10 meant bands could control their own list. Section 11 is controlled by the government registrar. Sawridge First Nation is a Section 10 band. This means the band controls its own membership list. And that is where the trouble started for people like Shelby Twin, the granddaughter of the late Chief Walter Twin.
I still have these at my parents' house.
Do you?
I'm pretty sure all three of these teddies I still have at my parents' house.
We met with her on Sawridge, though she currently lives in Edmonton.
It goes by the 1985 Indian Act rules, which I fall under to be a beneficiary. What they would like to do, as in the trustees, the current trustees, which also is chief and council, because the chief is a trustee, the idea is to make the band itself a beneficiary, which it's not currently. And so that would make it that they would get to decide who would be a beneficiary and who wouldn't be.
She has never been a member of Sawridge, but she has deep roots here.
I was born at Sawridge and then left at I was about 5 when we left. And I haven't really been back until the last recent couple years up there. One of the biggest things I feel that I missed out from was a connection to just family up there. What I've struggled with is a lot feeling like, do I kind of have the right to claim half of my identity?
With her step-grandmother Catherine's help, she is looking for a place to belong.
Should I throw that in this pile?
Yeah, I think it goes with them.
So, Walter and I.
She applied for membership more than a year ago.
My goal is to be able to gain membership and be able to become an active member of my community. They were going to be looked at end of September, and that was the last I kind of heard of what was going on, but not surprising, because there have been people who had honestly been waiting decades for their application to go through.
Okay, so
Walter looks so happy in that one.
yeah, he does.
She still hasn't heard either way.
He's what, 2 years?
Is he 2 or 3 years younger?
For Catherine Twin, Bill C-31 gave communities the right to exclude members, a big problem, especially when millions of dollars are at stake.
These exclusions and divisions and disconnections and separations have been normalized, and they're being continued by First Nations through membership rules and membership processes. We're participating in our own termination. You know, here at Sawridge we have 44 band members and only one is a child. What happened between this picture with all these children and our band membership list?
In this affidavit filed in court in 2015, she goes even further, saying, "For some time I have been very concerned that the elected band council members and elders who are also trustees of the trust are allowing their political and/or personal agenda to influence their decision-making as trustees." Twin could not comment when asked to explain her concerns on camera due to a confidentiality agreement she entered into when she left the trust. But she did offer opinions on how power is exercised in bands like Sawridge.
It ought not to be exercised by the political leadership because they're in a conflict of interest, because they're controlling the membership list, which in turn controls the voters list. And therefore, it should be determined by a body that is independent, that is competent, and that is bias-free. And it cannot be hijacked by the political forces.
She said membership decisions have to be fair.
Persons who qualify should be treated equally and fairly and transparently and timely, and there should be no discrimination of any kind on any basis,
Eric Hovius is a Cambridge, Ontario-based lawyer. He worked in government, but now, for the last 10 years, has mostly First Nation clients. He has concerns when the federal government hands over control of things like membership for First Nations. He's seen it can have a detrimental effect on ordinary people like Shelby Twin and others.
The people who are left in the dark or left outside and who don't have membership but believe they have a strong claim towards it will have to take their own government, their own community to court. And now you're paying, now the person's paying a lawyer to try to get their membership, while their community is paying another lawyer to argue that they shouldn't be a member. And now we're just wasting resources.
This is Krista and her two boys.
Some, like Margaret Ward, who have to bring their own community to court. We'll hear from her after the break.
Oh, you don't know the things we went through. Oh, my goodness. And the trips. I approached the chief, Walter Twin, at the time, and asked why we were not band members because of our grandmom and her granny and our history going all the way back. Right? Like we could trace our family history all the way back.
Margaret Ward and her sister Cecile Ward joined 11 other women to fight for Sawridge band membership back in 1985.
This is summer when she was born. And that's me taken outside the Sawridge with my sister, my older sister Cecile, and Elizabeth Poitras. She's still a band member. She's still alive, Elizabeth. Cecile and I really pushed hard for it.
They sued the Crown seeking a court declaration that the 1985 amendments to the Indian Act RSC 1985 C-15, commonly known as Bill C-31, are unconstitutional. The most critical question being, is Sawridge refusing to follow provisions of C-31 or simply exercising the powers and privileges granted? Finally, after more than a decade of fighting, the federal court justice ordered Sawridge to give the women their full membership. For Margaret Ward, it was the end to a long process.
Oh, you don't know the things we went through. Oh, my goodness. And the trips. And I said to her, I asked her one time when we were in the city, I said, is it really all worth it, all this BS? I said, like, we're jumping over hoops that aren't even there. Like, you know, like mental hoops, right, really, and bureaucracy crap. Like, you know, you've got to jump through all these hoops to get through or get anywhere.
But worth it in the end.
So then when I look at my kids and I think, yeah, okay. So I really pushed hard for it then. And I thought, okay, this is important for my kids also, not just for me. So, yeah, that was my incentive, was my boys.
The 2003 decision was partially about the rights of Indigenous women who married out of the band. Catherine Twin says that is just one area of discrimination in the Indian Act. Her stepdaughter, Deborah Sarah Finchen, whose father was longtime Sawridge chief Walter Twin, was also left out of membership due to sex discrimination.
Had Deborah been born male at birth, she would have had a right to, under the Indian Act, to be registered as an Indian and as a band member. And here it is, 2019. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms was passed in 1985. And people in Deborah's category are still not on par with their brothers, their full-blooded brothers. They're treated differently by the law.
For Deborah, it's blatantly unfair.
My siblings are all living in great big fancy houses, and I have a teeny-weeny little house that we all live in. I don't care that you guys like me or want me or whatever. I am still Walter's daughter. And you guys did not have to fight for this. You just got it handed to you. And not that I wanted handed it to me, but it's part of my heritage too. So what do you get, not me? What do your children get and not mine?
She last applied for membership a year and a half ago.
And I have not heard a word. Like, not even an acknowledgement that they have received it.
Her half-brother Roland Twin is the current chief of Sawridge. He declined our request for an interview.
I hate to say it, but I'm not holding up much hope. I think I've got like that much chance of getting it completed.
We're doing to each other now what the Indian Act did for so long that became the subject of complaint and court action.
Twin sees Sawridge taking over from the Indian Act. She believes Deborah's fight for membership has been difficult because there are no checks and balances on how the band councils govern. And this veteran of First Nations Crown relations believes the feds also allowed that to happen.
Canada's main objective in Indian policy is to reduce its liabilities.
Roland Panguish has worked for 4 national chiefs. He spent more than a dozen years at the Assembly of First Nations. He also helped develop the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
One of the big things I see is a conflict of interest on the Crown's part when they have fiduciary obligations to First Nations. Often our interests clash with the general public's issues. I find they don't, they just use the conflict of interest. They work things to their advantage. And that's why we can't get anywhere.
In recent years, Ottawa's push to devolve responsibilities to bands has also meant that when issues such as membership arise, the federal government can refuse to step in, reducing their own liability. This letter shows that the Indian Registrar will not step in when a band refuses membership, saying in part the Sawridge First Nation determines its own membership and the department cannot intervene in membership matters, even if the would-be member meets its requirements.
Now, what makes this situation unique and one maybe problematic is that the federal government is afraid that by making a decision, they could then be liable.
Lawyer Eric Hovius says he believes the federal government is not carrying its own fiduciary responsibility to First Nations.
So they're not really acting in the best interest of First Nation communities, finding alternatives, finding ways to help create the same kind of prosperity we have within our society. Instead, you have a fiduciary that's more concerned with their own potential liabilities, not just today, but moving in future.
Panguish says the recent push to download or devolve more federal authority to First Nation governments actually threatens the rights of grassroots people like Deborah Sarah Finchen and Shelby Twin. Both Hovius and Panguish are concerned that if Ottawa continues devolving policy in this way, more issues like Sawridge will arise.
I am concerned that the federal government is handing over portions of its duty onto communities without having the proper oversight and ultimately diminishing their role that they had agreed to act in the best interest of First Nations.
Canada's main objective in Indian policy is to reduce its liabilities, obviously. So although they have other rhetoric and say there's other reasons, I believe it's all financially driven to, restrict its costs. I mean, that's logical. But the thing is, it's done not in a fair manner. And what I'm afraid of is that we're going to have problems along the way, both in terms of human rights and in terms of possible problems with band councils who don't have proper accountability set up.
He's not at all surprised that the Sawridge membership dispute is in court.
I imagine we'll have lawsuits all over the place from individuals.
But as cases like Shelby's and Deborah's drag on, so does the fight for those denied their membership.
That's sad. It really is sad. It infuriates me that people have to fight to be part of their community, that you even have to apply. I get it, but that you even have to apply to say, yes, I'm Indigenous. That's what the concept of being part of the band should be. That you are all a family, you're all together.
Becoming a member would help for me feel a little bit more comfortable in kind of reclaiming and learning about a whole other side of me that I haven't had the ability to.
I'm still a little confused as to why having band membership affects them. Like I'm not, and when I say them, I'm talking about the family that already has band membership. And that I'm still unsure as to how it affects them, like what I'm taking away from them if I become a band member.
Go. Oh, all right.
If we're not putting the children at the center of everything and ensuring their belonging,
We did it for this generation that's coming up, so they wouldn't have to go through what we went through. And And now look at all these younger ones that are applying, and yeah, they're not having to go to court. But you might as well say they are, because all of this paperwork that they've got.
I really feel that myself and many others who are similar in my story, we can and we have the ability to help improve for a really great future.
I feel this time next year, I'm going to be sitting on that land. I'm going to be a full member. And I'm not going to have to fill out an application. I am one of those people that belong back on that ban list, and so are my brother and his kids. My whole family belongs back on that ban list.
Next week on APTN Investigates.
The RCMP isn't what you think it is. It isn't this icon of truth, justice, integrity. The reality is ugly.
When it became understood that the public was outraged by what had happened, there was a decision taken at some point that these 4 officers are an enormous liability.
Typical in a lot of these situations, the response is that certain bad apples end up being scapegoated and being made to look as though a bigger structural problem has been fixed.
It's put to me many times. Do you ever think this was racially motivated?
I don't know how anybody can look at the results of those trials and say, yep, that's justice.